So this is an addition to the 9/11 video. The way I do these sometimes, I record the audio and then I go in and do the illustration. I think about the visuals that's going to be on there. So as I was drawing the visuals early morning of 9/11, ready to post that video once the visuals are done, once the drawings are done, and end up doing one drawing and I'm doing a second drawing for this one, I suggest that you check out that first video if you're watching this as an independent clip, which I will release it as an independent clip. While watching that, I normally have things going on in the background. And in the background, a news story came up that was very pertinent to that first recording, to the first thing that I was talking about. I talked about my experience back in 20 years ago in West Virginia. Then I talked about my observations about what's going on right now on the anniversary as this is being released as I'm recording this. And then I concluded with some thoughts, so just a thought experiment, some ideas, and just some creative idea of what could happen in the future as is it over, is it the end? And then eventually I ended up concluding that audio, that recording, was saying I'm not sure, but just being hopeful that there's things that we can do. And I know I'm somewhat more creative than the average person. I've just been at this for so much longer, spending a lot of time. And I think other people can be creative, but sometimes I come up with things that people say, oh, you're being kind of crazy. I had situations where people are like, oh, what drugs are you? And I'm like, no. I thought, like, I'll be sitting there drinking with some people and like, what did you take? Like, no. I thought of this like 3 weeks ago and I was completely sober. And I'm just, now that maybe we're drinking and I'm a bit intoxicated, I'm a little comfortable enough to actually tell you these things. And since I quit drinking, and even when I wasn't drinking before, I still come up with some of these ideas. But it seemed credible to me. Now, if you recall back, that first scenario I talked about somebody who ended up getting to the United States of America during the refugee program, and then finding out that, hey, no, actually, one of my relatives was one of the kids who actually died in that drone strike, was an innocent, and they found that out 100%. They just knew it. They knew that person had died. So I got confirmation of that, some confirmation of that. I was watching things as I normally do when I'm drawing things are playing in the background. A Fox News story comes up. Oh, the drone attack has been found, reportedly, was actually some innocents. It was an aid worker who was working with an NGO that was actually in California. And this NGO in California, I found that out by going in further and looking for that story. And it turns out New York Times has a series called Video Reporting. It's going to be a link below. You can go and check it out on YouTube to get the rest of the story. I'm just going to try and condense that here. So it turns out, I think the primary target of this Hellfire missile, this being called Hellfire, tying in that imagery, and I'll get to that later on, but this Hellfire missile, sent by a drone, apparently hit someone called Zemrai Al-Mahdi, who's a 43-year-old, and about 7 other kids. Now, the New York Times does a pretty good job of piecing together different video, local video, and having people down there and tracking who it was. And it turns out that they say that the things that the United States military said this person was loading onto his vehicle were actually these jerrycans of water. And this is something that I don't think some people might take this for granted in the United States of America, depending on where they live. Their lived experience, like I mentioned in the story, how people through the lived experience saw me, oh, this is an American, I wasn't. The black people would say, oh, this is a black American, I wasn't. But due to their lived experience, they would project that onto other people, and we do that often. So I think maybe possibly the people who were watching this footage when the cameras and things saw that and like, oh, he's actually putting these jerrycans in. They might have thought, oh, that's gasoline in these jerrycans. But no, he was taking water home to his family because there was water outages. And this is something people in the West, I don't think really understand. People don't really have regular tap water in most of the world. I am used to living in certain places where you have to store water. You have to get water from other places. One of the typical things here in Nairobi, Kenya, these big clean water trucks, and they're one of the dirtiest trucks in the road. It's kind of some dichotomy that I see with them. But maybe somebody who isn't used to people actually having to do that, going to their office place, taking water in jerrycans, putting them back in the car, and then going back, stopping at different places. So this happens, and they track this person, and eventually they think, okay, maybe they thought that was gasoline. Maybe they thought these people were putting things in the vehicle to go out and attack. And a Hellfire missile, being called this Hellfire, tying that name to it. Why Hellfire? Even with the whole idea of the Bible, this biblical thing, oh, we're out there, we're going to put this Hellfire in people, and people think, yes, you need to go in there and bomb these people and show them who we are. And you have that imagery of that hell. And people will think, yes, it was hell in those buildings, those World Trade Center towers. So let's give them that hellfire. But even just the imagery of hell, that belief system coming from the Bible. Hell is mentioned, I think, 3 times in there. The imagery for hell actually comes from different people like Dante's Inferno and other people over the years coming up. This whole idea that people actually think hell is a positive thing to have is something that you can go and scare out there and give hell to people. We're to send those people to hell. People literally think that they can actually be happy in eternal heaven doing next to this God and things like that, while knowing there's other people, innocent people in some cases, who just never heard about their God, burning in hell for eternity in the most kind of painful. And they can also think that a being that created hell is also good. So with that kind of mentality, you can understand why someone can think the state, the government, who's just sending hellfire missiles to just bomb these people and kill these kids, and then come out to say, oh, there were secondary explosions. You look in the video, doesn't seem to be any secondary explosions. It seems to be one vehicle, one white pickup truck, one white Toyota pickup truck, and there's a lot of white pickup trucks, there's a lot of white Toyotas in the world. And during that whole tracking process, it turns out that these people, these terrorists that were actually in the place that they might have been tracking, they ended up actually attacking the airport a few days later, and they got blown up after that. And what were those other terrorists using? Those other terrorists were also using a white pickup truck, according to this reporting. So if this is correct, this could have just been an entire mix-up. But people are still going to look at these people and say, these are good people. These are the people we should follow. But no, part of why I'm happy, part of why I'm encouraged, part of why I think it's not going to be as bad as it could be, is that this recording, yes, the New York Times, I have a lot of issues with things that happen in the New York Times, but even just like that, the New York Times, there's some people who are controlling certain things, who are thinking, okay, no, this is what we need to do to save the world. And they might have undue influence on the rest of the New York Times, but the New York Times still comes out in this. Yes, you might say there might be some spooks releasing this stuff for other reasons, but this reporting seems to have just been people in the New York Times, private citizens, going out and working with other private citizens in Afghanistan that were working together, an NGO that was non-governmental organizations in California, with California with its own issues, but they seem to be doing some pretty decent work with the people in Afghanistan. This wasn't a gender studies thing, this wasn't a thing with the culture. They seem to be working with actual people in Afghanistan, actual Afghans who are trying to find ways to help other Afghans, if this reporting is true. That person was doing that. Even with that, those people collected this information, and the government comes out and they tell you the story, and they have the control information, they have their approved sources and things like that. They're not going to release this information out there. But you live in a place in the United States of America where there's a freedom of speech, where there's some valuation. It's a first culture, first society that's had a valuation of actual sharing of information, as free as it possibly could be. It could be freer, but it could be a lot worse. It is a lot worse in other places. You had these individuals, these citizens, come together and put this actual information out there, and now we know this information. Now this information, I think, is the kind of things that will protect us, will protect humanity, will help for human flourishing in the future. Using these technologies in ways that are going to make us leave these inane kind of belief systems and mistrusts, and we'll be able to see like this wasn't people at the New York Times who were firing that Hellfire missile. This might have been somebody who was following orders. But who were giving these orders? Those leaders are not everyone. Those people who were bombed are not the Taliban. They're not the terrorists. They are terrorists. They are people who try to bomb. They are people, but now we'll be able to identify those people and say, those are those people. We are here trying to do this other thing. They might still be preying on us, but we can actually come together and we can combat and we can inform and we can tell each other that those are the people we don't want. These are the things we don't want in society, and we can go forward and be better in other ways. So I think that we've been in the information age, where information was out there in certain places. And now we can come to the age of understanding. Problems occur because of how we define X rather than what X is. This situation might actually be defined for what actually happened there. Now people might actually see this is what happened. There was an actual confusion here. This wasn't the American people. And this might actually assuage that one person who might be able to turn this into a situation, oh, they're being secretive. Oh, the US government is saying that, oh, it wasn't actually, there was a secondary bombing. But now everybody can see that. Now the American people can see that, and you can see the actual reaction to this. You can see the outcry if this is a true story, that we don't support this. And it might be a lot harder for somebody to take this, even some of the terrorists back there, to take that and twist that into something that would lead someone to actually go out there and commit more terror in reprisal for this. But to do this, I think you have to leave superstition in the past. You have to put the primacy of facts, truth, empirical evidence, and things like that. You have to deal with X what it X is. When you vote for certain people, you are giving them tacit approval to behave in certain ways. When they keep behaving in those ways and you keep voting for them and you keep making excuses for them, you get some responsibility in it. When you look at a place like with these terrorists, they don't have the voting, they don't really have the general support of the people. But in places like in the United States of America, you are voting for those people. So hold them to higher standards. Do better as Americans, because that is something that you can afford to do. That is a privilege you have. That is something exceptional about where you live. Because in this last drawing, this drawing out of 5, and I might end up doing the other drawings as well, but I decided to just do one for that other part and one for this one. And this one I decided to end with this one with that Nostradamus quote. Even me as a kid back then in college, this quote was making the rounds. People were saying, oh, it's Nostradamus, this is some superstition thing. But left that superstition bad. I even had that question mark on the drawing because it was like, was that really Nostradamus? Did Nostradamus really say this? Or is this being attributed to him for another reason? And I was really skeptical about this whole idea of the city on fire. I'm like, okay, the buildings are on fire, but is a great city on fire? And I think it found out this quote wasn't really Nostradamus. It was misquoted from him and things like that. But regardless, that's the kind of thing people used to believe, these kind of superstitions. Another one of those is the American dream. I prefer the American reality. Reality is better than the dream. The country could be like Afghanistan, but America is the country that it is due to efforts of human beings, other earthlings on this spaceship Earth. If we can actually focus on some of these things and improve the status for all of us and help with human flourishing, take pride of what makes you exceptional. Take pride of the differences. Take pride of what human beings have accomplished and what you can accomplish. And then we can come together as earthlings, Team Human, that in 20 years, instead of having more horrible attacks to tie to this 9/11 anniversary, we might actually be Solarians at that time. We might actually be celebrating the first human beings getting to Mars.